I'll never forget the day I met my tutor. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the leaves crunch underfoot and the air smells like possibility. I was struggling with advanced calculus, a subject that had always been my nemesis throughout college. My professor had suggested getting a tutor after I failed my midterm, and though I was reluctant at first, my desperation to pass the class eventually won out. Little did I know that this decision would change everything. My name is Alex, and I was in my junior year at Westlake University, majoring in engineering. I had always been good at most subjects, but calculus was my downfall. It wasn't just about passing the class anymore. It was about maintaining my scholarship, which required a minimum GPA that was now in jeopardy. So when my academic advisor emailed me with the contact information for a graduate student who tutored calculus, I reached out immediately. His name was Daniel. We arranged to meet at the campus library on a Thursday afternoon. I remember feeling nervous as I waited at one of the study tables near the back, surrounded by towering bookshelves that seemed to judge my mathematical inadequacy. I wasn't sure what to expect. Maybe some nerdy, socially awkward math genius who would make me feel even worse about my struggles with the subject. But when Daniel walked in, he defied every expectation I had. He wasn't the stereotypical math tutor I had imagined. Tall with dark wavy hair that fell just above his eyes, he had this confident stride that immediately caught my attention. He wore a simple blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows and dark jeans. There was something magnetic about him. The way he scanned the room before his eyes landed on me, the slight smile that formed when our gazes met. "Alex?" he asked, approaching my table. His voice was deeper than I expected, warm and assured. I nodded, suddenly feeling a strange flutter in my stomach that I attributed to nervousness about the tutoring session. "That's me. You must be Daniel." He extended his hand, and when I shook it, I noticed how firm his grip was, how warm his palm felt against mine. "Nice to meet you. So, I hear calculus is giving you trouble?" There was no judgment in his tone, just genuine interest, and I found myself relaxing a little. "Yeah, derivatives and integrals might as well be written in hieroglyphics as far as I'm concerned." He laughed, and the sound did something to me. It made me want to hear it again. "Well, by the time we're done, you'll be reading those hieroglyphics like they're your native language." The library was busy that day, with students huddled over textbooks and laptops. The soft murmur of whispered conversations and the occasional rustle of turning pages created a soothing backdrop. We sat at a table by the window, where afternoon sunlight streamed in, casting a golden glow over our workspace. Daniel chose to sit next to me rather than across, explaining that it would be easier to look at the same page from the same angle. I was acutely aware of his presence, the faint scent of his cologne, the way his shoulder occasionally brushed against mine as he leaned in to explain a concept. As we began our session, I was surprised by how patient Daniel was. He didn't rush through explanations or make me feel stupid for not understanding. Instead, he broke down complex problems into manageable steps, using real-world analogies that actually made sense to me. "Think of a derivative as the rate at which something is changing," he explained, drawing a curve on my notebook. "Like when you're driving, your speedometer shows your speed at any given moment. That's like the derivative of your position." For the first time, calculus started to make sense to me. But I found myself distracted by other things. The way his brow furrowed slightly when he concentrated, how he ran his fingers through his hair when thinking about how to explain something difficult, the small smile that appeared when I finally understood a concept. As our session progressed, I noticed a shift in our dynamic. What started as strictly professional began to feel more comfortable, more personal. We'd occasionally veer off into tangential conversations about our majors, our career goals, our favorite spots on campus. Daniel was working on his PhD in applied mathematics, but revealed he had a passion for classical literature, which surprised me. "Most people think math and literature are opposites," he said, "but I see them as different languages describing the same human experience." I found myself nodding, captivated by his perspective. I've never thought about it that way. I've always seen them as completely separate worlds. "That's the problem with education sometimes," he replied, leaning back in his chair. "We compartmentalize knowledge instead of seeing how everything connects." Our conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by moments of laughter and shared insights. I couldn't remember the last time I'd connected with someone so quickly, so effortlessly. And beneath it all was an undercurrent of something I wasn't ready to name. a tension, an awareness that made my heart beat a little faster whenever our eyes met for too long. We had been studying for almost 2 hours when I hit a particularly challenging problem. I was getting frustrated, tapping my pen against the notebook repeatedly. "I just don't see how to approach this," I said, running a hand through my hair in frustration. "Here, let me show you a trick," Daniel said, reaching for my pen. I handed it to him, expecting him to write in my notebook. Instead, he gently took my wrist, turning it so my palm faced upward. The unexpectedness of the gesture made me freeze. His touch was light but deliberate, his fingers warm against my skin. "Sometimes," he said, his voice softer now, "it helps to visualize the problem differently." Instead of writing the formula in my notebook, he began to write on the inside of my wrist. The pen's tip tickled slightly as he wrote, but I was too stunned to laugh or pull away. I watched, mesmerized, as he wrote a series of numbers on my skin. It took me a moment to realize that what he was writing wasn't a mathematical formula at all. It was a phone number, his phone number. When he finished, he looked up at me, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "That's my personal number," he said, "in case you need help outside our scheduled sessions." There was something in the way he said it, something in his gaze that suggested this wasn't just about calculus anymore. I stared at the numbers on my wrist, feeling the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't just a tutor giving a student his contact information. This was something else entirely. I began, not knowing what to say. My heart was racing, and I was suddenly very aware of how close we were sitting, how his knee was just barely touching mine under the table. Daniel seemed to sense my confusion. He pulled back slightly, giving me space. "No pressure," he said with a small smile. "Just thought it might be easier than exchanging emails all the time." I nodded, grateful for the way he had diffused the tension while still leaving the door open. "Thanks," I managed to say. "I might take you up on that." We returned to the calculus problems, but something had shifted between us. There was a new awareness, a charged energy that hadn't been there before. I found it harder to concentrate, my eyes repeatedly drawn to the numbers on my wrist, to the way his hands moved as he explained concepts, to his profile as he looked down at the textbook. When our session finally ended, I packed up my books slowly, reluctant for our time together to be over. "Same time next week?" Daniel asked as he stood up. "Definitely," I replied, perhaps too quickly. "I feel like I actually understand this stuff now." He smiled, and that flutter returned to my stomach. "You're a quick learner. Just practice those problems we went over, and text me if you get stuck." Text me. The words hung between us, loaded with possibility. As I walked back to my dorm that evening, I couldn't stop looking at the number on my wrist. I traced the digits with my finger, replaying the moment he had written them on my skin. It felt intimate, personal in a way that exchanging phone numbers usually didn't. I wondered if I was reading too much into it, if I was projecting my own unexpected feelings onto a simple gesture. But there had been something in his eyes, hadn't there? Something in the way his fingers had lingered on my wrist for just a moment longer than necessary. I had never been attracted to a man before, or at least, I had never allowed myself to acknowledge such feelings. Growing up in a small, conservative town had taught me to suppress any thoughts that didn't fit the expected narrative. But here, in college, away from the watchful eyes of my community, I found myself confronting emotions I had long buried. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Daniel, his smile, his intelligence, the way he made complex concepts seem simple. I thought about the way my skin had tingled when he touched my wrist, the way my heart had raced when our eyes met. Was this attraction? Was this what it felt like to want someone? I stared at his number, still visible on my wrist despite my evening shower. I had been careful not to wash it off completely. Should I text him? What would I say? Would he think I was too eager if I reached out so soon? Finally, around midnight, I picked up my phone and typed a simple message. "Thanks for the help today. This is Alex, by the way." I hit send before I could overthink it, then immediately regretted it. It was late, and he was probably asleep. He'd think I was weird for texting at midnight. I put my phone down and tried to distract myself by reviewing my calculus notes, but I couldn't focus. To my surprise, my phone buzzed just a few minutes later. "No problem. Glad I could help." Still awake studying. The fact that he had responded so quickly made my heart race. He was awake, thinking about me too, maybe? I typed back, trying to, but calculus has a way of putting me to sleep. His response came quickly. "LOL. I take offense to that as a math nerd. Maybe we need to find a way to make it more interesting for you. I smiled at my phone, wondering what he meant by more interesting. Was he flirting? Or was I projecting again? I decided to be a little bold. I think you already made it more interesting than it's ever been. There was a longer pause this time, and I worried I had crossed a line. But then, I'm glad to hear that. Looking forward to our next session. We continued texting for another hour, our conversation drifting away from calculus to movies, books, and our backgrounds. I learned that Daniel had grown up in Chicago, that he loved classical music and played the piano, that he had a younger sister who was studying abroad in France. I told him about my small hometown, my dreams of becoming an engineer, my love for hiking and photography. It was the easiest conversation I'd had in a long time, and I found myself opening up in ways I rarely did with people I had just met. There was something about Daniel that made me feel safe, understood. By the time we said goodnight, it was nearly 2 a.m., and I had almost forgotten that he was supposed to be just my tutor. The days that followed were filled with anticipation for our next session. We continued texting, sometimes about calculus problems I was working on, but more often about our days, our thoughts, our lives. Each message felt like a small bridge being built between us, connecting our separate worlds. I practiced the problems he had assigned diligently, wanting to impress him at our next meeting. For the first time, I found myself actually enjoying calculus, seeing the beauty in the patterns and relationships that Daniel had pointed out. Or maybe I just enjoyed having a reason to text him when I encountered a particularly challenging problem. When Thursday came around again, I arrived at the library early, my heart pounding with nervous excitement. I spotted Daniel as soon as he walked in, and the smile that spread across his face when he saw me made my stomach flip. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat next to me. "How's the calculus coming along?" "Better," I replied. "Those practice problems really helped." He nodded, looking pleased. "I knew they would. You're getting this stuff faster than you think." This session felt different from the first. There was an ease between us now, a familiarity born from our late-night text conversations. We sat closer, our shoulders touching more frequently, our laughs coming more readily. When Daniel explained a concept, he would often touch my arm or hand to emphasize a point, each contact sending a jolt of electricity through me. We were working through a particularly difficult integral when Daniel noticed something. "You've washed it off," he said, gesturing to my wrist where his number had been. I felt my cheeks warm. "Well, I had to shower eventually," I said with a small laugh. "But don't worry, I saved it in my phone." He smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that made my heart skip. Good. I was worried I might have to write it again. The way he said it, with his eyes holding mine, made it clear that writing his number on my wrist hadn't been merely practical. It had been intentional, meaningful. "Would you?" I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. "Write it again, I mean." Daniel's eyes darkened slightly, and he reached for my hand, turning it palm up just as he had done before. But this time, instead of immediately writing, he traced the veins on my wrist with his finger, a feather-light touch that made me shiver. "I would," he said softly. "But maybe this time, I'd add something else too." My breath caught. "Like what?" He leaned in slightly, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Like an invitation to dinner. Somewhere that isn't the library. Somewhere we can talk without whispering." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. This was it. The moment where our relationship would clearly step beyond the boundaries of tutor and student. I knew I should consider the implications, the complications. But sitting there, with Daniel's eyes on mine and his fingers still resting lightly on my wrist, all I could think about was how much I wanted to say yes. "I'd like that," I said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. The smile that spread across his face was worth any uncertainty I felt. "Great. Are you free tomorrow night? There's this little Italian place off campus that I think you'd like." "Tomorrow sounds perfect," I replied, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. We tried to return to calculus after that, but both of us were distracted. Our knees touched under the table, and neither of us moved away. When Daniel explained a concept, he would lean in closer than necessary, his breath warm against my ear. And when I correctly solved a difficult problem, the pride in his eyes made me feel like I could conquer any mathematical challenge. As our session came to an end, I found myself reluctant to leave, to break the bubble of connection we had created. Daniel seemed to feel the same way, taking his time packing up his books and notes. So, tomorrow at 7, he confirmed as we walked out of the library together. The evening air was cool, the campus quiet as dusk settled around us. 7, I repeated. Should I meet you there or? I'll pick you up, he said. Text me your address. We stood there for a moment, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. In the fading light, Daniel looked even more handsome, his features softened by the golden glow of sunset. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow, he said, his voice sincere. Me too, I replied, meaning it more than I could express. He hesitated for a moment, then reached out and squeezed my hand briefly. Good night, Alex. Good night, Daniel. I watched him walk away, my hand still tingling from his touch. As I made my way back to my dorm, I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted. For years, I had suppressed a part of myself, denied feelings that didn't fit the life I thought I was supposed to lead. But now, with Daniel, I was allowing myself to feel, to want, to explore. That night, I lay in bed thinking about what tomorrow might bring. Was this a date? It felt like one. The thought both terrified and exhilarated me. I had never been on a date with a man before. What would it be like? Would it be different from dating women? Would we hold hands across the table? Would he try to kiss me goodnight? The thought of Daniel's lips on mine sent a rush of heat through my body. Yes, I wanted that. I wanted to know what it would feel like to be that close to him, to cross the final boundary between friendship and something more. I slept fitfully that night, my dreams filled with fragments of Daniel, his smile, his hands, his voice. When I woke the next morning, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety about the evening ahead. What should I wear? What would we talk about? What if it was awkward outside of our tutoring dynamic? Throughout the day, my thoughts kept returning to Daniel. I found myself checking my phone frequently, hoping for a text from him. Around noon, my wish was granted. Looking forward to tonight. Hope you like garlic bread. This place makes the best in town. Such a simple message, but it made me smile like an idiot. I replied, I love garlic bread, though it might not be great for a first date. I hesitated before sending, wondering if I was being too presumptuous by calling it a date. But I hit send anyway, holding my breath as I waited for his response. It came quickly. Don't worry, I'll be having it too. We can both have garlic breath together. That's how you know it's a good first date. First date. He had said it too. This was really happening. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anticipation. I spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear, finally settling on a dark blue button-down shirt and my best jeans. I wanted to look good for Daniel, to see appreciation in his eyes when he saw me. At 6:55 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text. I'm outside your building. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my jacket and headed downstairs. Daniel was waiting by his car, a modest but well-maintained sedan. He was dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark pants, looking so handsome that I momentarily forgot how to breathe. Hey, he said, his eyes taking me in. You look great. So do you, I replied, feeling a flush of pleasure at his compliment. He opened the passenger door for me, a small gesture that made my heart flutter. As we drove to the restaurant, we fell into easy conversation, the slight awkwardness I had feared nowhere to be found. Daniel told me about his day, about a breakthrough he'd had with his research, about a funny encounter with his academic advisor. I shared stories about my engineering projects, about my roommate's latest antics, about the book I was currently reading. The restaurant was exactly as Daniel had described, a small, cozy Italian place with soft lighting and the rich aroma of garlic and tomato sauce filling the air. We were seated at a corner table, intimate and private, with a candle flickering between us. I've been wanting to bring you here since our first session, Daniel admitted as we looked over the menus. I had a feeling you'd like it. The admission surprised me. Really? You were thinking about that during our first meeting? He looked up, his eyes meeting mine with that intensity that made my pulse quicken. I was thinking about a lot of things during our first meeting. The honesty in his voice made me bold. Like what? Daniel set his menu down, giving me his full attention. Like how your eyes light up when you understand a concept. Like how you bite your lip when you're concentrating. Like how I wanted to get to know you beyond calculus problems. His words hung between us, charged with meaning. I felt seen in a way I never had before, appreciated for details I hadn't known anyone would notice. I was thinking things too, I admitted. About you. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Good things, I hope. Very good things, I confirmed, returning his smile. Dinner was delicious, but it was the conversation that made the evening special. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our families, our dreams for the future. Daniel told me about his coming-out experience in high school, how his parents had been supportive but worried about the challenges he might face. I shared my own confusion and suppression, how I had dated girls in high school because it was expected, how I had never allowed myself to fully explore my attraction to men. And now, Daniel asked, his voice gentle, how do you feel about exploring that part of yourself? I looked at him across the table, at this man who had started as my tutor and become so much more in such a short time. Now, I said, I feel ready. With the right person. The look in his eyes told me he understood what I was saying, who I was referring to. He reached across the table and took my hand, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm. I'd be honored to be that person, Alex. However slow or fast you want to take things. His understanding, his patience, made something warm unfurl in my chest. This wasn't just attraction. It was the beginning of something deeper, something built on mutual respect and genuine connection. After dinner, we walked around the neighborhood, our hands brushing against each other until Daniel finally took mine, intertwining our fingers. It felt right, natural, as if our hands had been designed to fit together. We talked about lighter things now, favorite movies, travel dreams, childhood pets, but the underlying current of attraction remained, growing stronger with each shared laugh, each lingering glance. When we eventually made our way back to his car, I felt a mixture of contentment and anticipation. The evening had been perfect, better than I could have imagined, and I wasn't ready for it to end. As Daniel drove me back to my dorm, a comfortable silence fell between us. He parked outside my building and turned to me, his expression serious now. I had an amazing time tonight, Alex. So did I said softly. Thank you for dinner. And for everything. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that made my heart skip. I want to see you again. Not just for tutoring. I want that too, I replied, surprised by how easy it was to be honest about my feelings with him. Daniel reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead, his touch feather-light. Can I kiss you goodnight? He asked, his voice low. My heart hammered in my chest. Yes, I whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to change my mind. But I didn't want to change my mind. I wanted this, wanted him, with a certainty that surprised me. When his lips finally met mine, it was gentle, questioning at first, then more assured as I responded. His hand came up to cup my cheek, and I found myself leaning into his touch, into the warmth and rightness of the moment. The kiss deepened, and I felt a rush of desire unlike anything I had experienced before. This was what kissing was supposed to feel like. This connection, this alignment of want and need and affection. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, I knew that something fundamental had shifted in my life. Wow, Daniel said, his eyes darker now, his voice slightly rough. Yeah, I agreed, unable to form a more coherent response. Wow is right. He smiled, tracing my lower lip with his thumb. I should let you go, but I'll text you tomorrow, okay? I nodded, reluctant to leave, but knowing we both needed time to process what was happening between us. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Alex. I walked up to my dorm in a daze, my lips still tingling from his kiss. As I lay in bed that night, I replayed every moment of our evening together, from the way his eyes had lit up when he saw me, to the feel of his hand in mine as we walked, to the perfect pressure of his lips against mine. For the first time in my life, I felt fully aligned with myself, as if the person I had been pretending to be and the person I truly was had finally merged into one authentic whole. Over the following weeks, Daniel and I continued to see each other, both for tutoring sessions and for dates. We went to movies, to concerts, to art exhibits. We spent lazy Sunday afternoons in his apartment, cooking together and talking for hours. And yes, there were more kisses, each one better than the last as we grew more comfortable with each other, more attuned to what the other liked. My calculus grade improved dramatically, partly because I was actually studying now, but mostly because Daniel had a way of making the subject come alive for me. He connected mathematical concepts to real-world applications that resonated with my engineering interests, showing me how calculus was relevant to the career I was pursuing. But more important than my academic improvement was my personal growth. With Daniel, I felt free to be myself, to explore aspects of my identity that I had long suppressed. He never pushed me or rushed me, always respecting my pace as I navigated this new territory. When I finally told my closest friends about our relationship, their support and acceptance further validated my journey. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, of fear about what this meant for my future, about how my family would react when I eventually told them. But Daniel was there through it all, a steady presence, a safe harbor in the storm of my self-discovery. 3 months after our first tutoring session, I found myself back in the library with Daniel, studying for my calculus final. We sat side by side, just as we had that first day, but now with the easy familiarity of a couple. His leg pressed against mine under the table, and occasionally he would squeeze my hand when I solved a particularly difficult problem. As we were packing up to leave, Daniel took my wrist, turning it palm up just as he had done that fateful day. "Remember this?" he asked, tracing the spot where he had written his number. I smiled, warmth spreading through me at the memory. How could I forget? It was the best thing a tutor has ever done for me. He laughed softly, then reached into his bag and pulled out a pen. I was thinking maybe I should write something else there now. Curious, I extended my wrist to him. Like what? With careful strokes, he wrote 3 simple words on my skin. "I love you." My breath caught as I read the words, emotion welling up inside me. Looking up, I found his eyes on mine, vulnerable and hopeful. "I love you too," I said, the words coming easily, naturally, as if I had been waiting my whole life to say them to him. His smile was radiant as he leaned in to kiss me, right there in the library where our story had begun. And as I kissed him back, I thought about how sometimes the most unexpected turns in life, like a tutor taking your pen and writing his number on your wrist, can lead you exactly where you're meant to be. What had started as a desperate attempt to pass calculus had become the most important journey of my life. A journey not just of academic learning, but of self-discovery, acceptance, and love. And I wouldn't have changed a single moment of it. Total _char_count, 18,744.